Living in rural Vietnam, whether you are rich or poor, young or old, there is always some kind of pressure. The real question is, how do we shake off that heavy jacket of outside expectations? Hey everyone, I'm Chu, 75 years old, living in the countryside of northern Vietnam. Today, I'd like to share a rather unique cultural aspect of my hometown. You see, around here, there is a very peculiar job. Nobody gets paid a single dime for it, yet everyone works incredibly hard at it, and that job is gossiping about other people's families. Just recently, I read a comment on my channel saying that when you live in the countryside, you have to be clever and watch your step. Otherwise, it can get pretty scary. In the countryside, there are actually quite a few things people are worried about. First, we fear being poor or running out of money. Second is the fear of getting sick and dealing with illness. Third is the dread of neighborhood gossip and whispers. Fourth is the fear of being left behind. Fifth is the fear of loneliness in old age. Sixth is the worry over natural disasters ruining our crops. And seventh, well, we just fear the unknown forces of nature. But out of all these, the one things people around here dread the most is the courtroom of public opinion and those constant whispers. Some folks even joke that we don't really need social media in the village because local news travels way faster than the internet. But behind these seemingly harmless small town chats lies an invisible weight of pressure that not everyone is willing to talk about. I remember a family in our neighborhood who lived a very simple, ordinary life. Their old house wasn't flashy or beautiful, but it was cozy enough to keep the sun and rain out. However, the trouble all started with the whispers. Whenever guests came over to visit, some would casually ask, "Hey, I heard you two make a pretty good salary, so how come you haven't built a new house yet?" Others would just blunt and say straight to their faces, "You call yourself a government official, yet you can't even put up a decent roof over your family's head after all these years." At first it was just casual gossip from people passing by, but hearing it over and over again really started to feel like a heavy burden. Eventually, whenever guests came over, the homeowners began to feel deeply self-conscious, not because they were worried about the house falling apart, but because they were terrified of being judged. It even got to the point where the husband and wife didn't want to invite their close friends or colleagues over anymore. They were simply afraid of the judgment and all those endless whispers following them around just because of the house they lived in. And so a decision was finally made to build a brand new house. It wasn't because they actually needed a new place, but simply because they couldn't stand being looked down upon anymore. On the day they started construction, half the village gathered around to watch. Some folks came over to ask questions, offer suggestions, and congratulate them, but others just stood on the sidelines just to watch and stare. And right then and there, a whole new batch of stories began to brew. The whispers started up all over again. Where on earth did that family get the money for this? They must have borrowed a fortune from the bank. Pushing themselves like that will only bring them misery later on. They knew it was just typical small town talk, but the more they heard it, the more they wanted to build something grand to prove everyone wrong. At first, they only planned to build a house just big enough for their needs, but after hearing the village gossip, they changed the blueprints to make it even bigger. What started as a simple design turned into a lavish project, all because they hoped that once it was finished, the whispers would finally stop. When the house was completed, it was truly beautiful. Honestly, it was one of the finest homes in the entire village. Everyone passing by would stop to stare. Some would praise them, saying, "Wow, that family has really come up in the world now. But right behind their backs, others would murmur, sure, it's a beautiful house, but they must be drowning in debt. I wonder if they can even carry that heavy load. This is a true story, though it might not be the same everywhere. But you see, before you build, people talk. While you are building, people talk. And even when you are completely finished, they still talk. It seems there is absolutely no way to please everyone. Meanwhile, for the family inside, a whole different story begins. After the housewarming party, when they rightfully should have been resting after pouring so much sweat and tears into building that home, they actually had to work much harder. They had to cut back on spending, and sometimes, even when they got sick, they didn't dare take a single day off. The house is indeed grand, but the pressure inside is just as massive. There are times you sit inside the very home you built with your own hands, yet you feel completely uneasy simply because everything started not from your own needs but from the words of other people. In the countryside, the absolute biggest fear is being looked down upon. But we often forget that the people talking don't have to live our lives. They don't pay off our debts, they don't do our worrying for us, and they don't carry our pressure. They just talk and then they forget. There is an unspoken truth in the village that nobody says out loud, but everyone knows. Having a big house gets you a higher seat in people's eyes. They might not know what you do for a living or how you actually live your life, but just one look at your house is enough for them to judge who you are. And the hardest part isn't actually building a big house. The hardest part is having the courage to decide not to build it just because of what other people say. When you have a healthy body, successful children, and a peaceful life, that is when you are truly the richest person alive. Speaking of social pressure, a wedding in the countryside isn't just an affair between two families. It's pretty much a village-wide event. I still remember this one wedding of a very ordinary family in our neighborhood. They weren't well off by any means. At first, both families only planned to keep things simple, inviting close relatives and neighbors over to share their joy. But then the trouble started with the whispers all over again. The moment the family began preparing for their child's wedding, somehow the whole village found out about it. Or maybe it was just the locals doing their usual guessing games. And then the comparisons started popping up with people asking things like, hey, that other family over there is having a much harder time, yet they still manage to throw a feast with hundreds of tables. Is this family really going to keep it that simple? Others would chime in saying, that other family over there is known to be quite poor, yet they still threw a massive feast. This family here must just be trying to pinch pennies. There were so many other whispers flying around about how they should host the wedding for their child. So, what started as a simple plan slowly began to snowball, adding more tables, ordering more dishes, and renting a much grander tent just to keep up appearances. After all, the parents thought to themselves, well, maybe they're right. Our children only get married once in a lifetime. When the wedding day arrived, the guests didn't just come to congratulate the couple, they also came to observe. They looked closely at how the food was presented, judged the dishes, counted the number of tables, and some even kept an eye on how thick the wedding envelopes were. Once everyone sat down at the tables, the small talk really started to heat up. For a family that makes good money, there aren't many dishes on the table, are there? They must be really budgeting. Some spoke out loud, while others whispered softly. But the trouble is, those soft whispers always seemed to travel the fastest. Even when the wedding was all over, the stories didn't stop. On their way home, people started chatting. Well, that wedding feast today was pretty ordinary. Once they got back to their own doorsteps, they kept talking, and before you knew it, even the folks who didn't even attend the wedding knew every single detail. As the old saying goes, the village mouth is like the ocean waves. People will talk this way and that, and it's just the way it is. But there is a strange irony to it. If you throw a small wedding, they call it cheap and sloppy. But if you throw a massive one, they say you're just showing off. That's how it goes in the countryside. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's just that no matter what you do, people will always find a story to spin. Behind the loud, joyful days of the children are the quiet, anxious days of the parents. They worry about what was spent, they fret over what is still owed, and they stress over how to balance their lives back out. Some weddings look so vibrant and festive on the outside, but on the inside, the atmosphere is incredibly heavy. Yet, a big part of that heaviness comes from the fact that we let ourselves lose control simply by listening to the village chatter. There are so many worries after a wedding, but at least the two families finally gather together and the bride and groom are officially wed. But few people know that before that happy day arrived, the young couple had to endure quite a few whispers in the village. You see, a countryside wedding doesn't actually begin on the day you set up the festive tent. It starts the moment someone comes to ask for the young lady's hand in marriage. Just a rumor that a young couple is getting to know each other is enough to get the neighborhood small talk buzzing. One person asks another, and that person passes it along to someone else. Hey, I heard that family has a suitor coming over. I wonder what the other side is like. Do they even match? These chats might sound perfectly harmless at first, but slowly they turn into malicious gossip and backbiting. People start picking apart the family background, judging their jobs, and even digging up old ghosts from the past to talk about. Sometimes, before the young couple even has a chance to truly understand each other, the village has already discussed every single detail of their lives. In the countryside, a family's private matter can easily become public property for the whole village. And because of that, more than a few relationships start cracking under the pressure of all those constant whispers. Some would even scoff, why on earth did they pick that person? There are plenty of better folks out there. That girl or that boy has this or that flaw. Hearing all this, the young couple starts to waver. It's not because they don't love each other, but simply because there are just too many outside voices crowding their minds. Around here, anything related to marriage gets magnified under a microscope. From family status to employment, and down to the past, even rumors with no proof at all are spoken as if they were gospel truth. Some couples were doing perfectly fine, but because of the gossip, they started doubting each other. Many weddings that should have been purely joyful were preceded by immense pressure. In the village, malicious gossip doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be repeated often enough to slowly eat away at a person's peace of mind. People might just talk for fun, using someone else's life as a casual conversation starter over tea, but the person listening carries those words for a very long time. Sometimes a single comment can change a whole decision, a decision that alters the course of a lifetime. But when you truly sit down and think about it, the two people living together are the couple themselves, not the entire village. Other folks can offer opinions and make remarks, but nobody can live your life for you. They certainly won't take responsibility for your happiness. Not every countryside place is exactly like this, but gossip will always find a way. However, if you let those whispers dictate your life, you might just end up losing the things that matter most. Today, one person says this, and tomorrow, someone else says that. If we spend our whole lives trying to listen to every single voice, we'll never figure out the right way to live. After all, everyone has their own opinion and a completely different point of view. If you try to please one person, you'll end up going against another. So, the most important thing isn't to hear everything, but to know when to tune out the noise and stand your ground. You know your own situation best, you know what you truly need, and you are the only one who answers for your own choices. People can say whatever they want, but they can't live your life for you. They can judge you, but they won't be there to carry the consequences for you. So, hear it to be aware, but don't let yourself get swept away by it. My dear friends, you've just heard a few very familiar stories from our countryside. If this resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below so we can all reflect on it together. Well, this video has gotten quite long, so please allow me to bring it to a close right here. Thank you so much for your time and for following along. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you all again soon.